Hello everybody, Lord Verminard back again in Motortown behind the wheel. And this is going to be a little bit different than what I usually do. Oh, there's a random NPC just hanging out there. I kind of wanted to talk about how I tune a car for racing in Motortown. I guess you could kind of call it a tutorial, but I guess just to show you my process of how I would do it. That's what we're going to do today. So I'm just going to kind of take you through what I would normally do to tune a car for Friday night races or for whatever we're going to do. Even if it's not on a regular racetrack, even if it's on, you know, an event that was made by somebody. So I've grabbed a unassuming race car, which is the Dory pickup truck. Now I wanted to do something because the Dory is a little bit special. I'm going to change one of the parts to something. Yes, see, the Dory comes with a 50/30 differential in the rear already. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop that out for now, because many of the cars in the game do not have that. So otherwise, this is a bone stock Dory right now. So it has no upgrades, stock engine. It is how you get it. So, oh, one other thing too, before we get started here, I am playing on a gamepad with analog sticks. Let me talk about the assists here for just a minute. So a lot of this is going to be personal preference, right? But I can just show you, this is what my setup normally looks like. You know, I don't use manual transmission at all, or I don't use automatic transmission ever. Auto throttle blip, anti-stall clutch. I don't have the shifting failure thing turned on. So the gamepad steering speed is going to be, that's an important setting. The way that it comes stock in this game is way too slow, even in sport mode. So I suggest if you're using a gamepad with an analog stick, you should bump this speed up a little bit. Steering assist strength, and this is one that I just recently started using. I don't usually use it. Well, there's some vehicles I don't use it on. Some that I do. If I'm just driving normally, I don't use it. Some of the cars that are set up for racing, I will use it. Some I don't. It just kind of depends on how it feels to me. 60% is normally where I consider like a baseline. I haven't noticed it really doing much under 60%. And usually anything over like 80 or 90% or higher, it interferes way too much and it makes it really hard to counter steer. So if you're playing around with this setting, I would try 60% and see how that feels for you. Like I said, I don't use it on every car, but I'm going to use it. I'm going to keep it where it's at right now for today, just to keep things normal. Traction control. When I'm tuning a car, I do not use traction control at all. That's usually something that I will think about doing at the very end stages of tuning the car. But for figuring out what I want to do with the car, I leave that at 0. Again, traction control I haven't found to do much under 50%. Usually it has to be around 60 before anything even happens. So keep that in mind. I might circle back to that later in the video here, but for now, I'm keeping it at 0. Stability control. I haven't noticed this actually doing much of anything. I've driven cars back to back on a track with this at 0 and with it at 100%, and I've noticed 0 difference. I think it only kicks in when you are like way out of control. When you're sliding really far sideways, it'll start to apply the brakes for you. Other than that, I don't see much point in using that for racing purposes. So that's where it's at right now. And then ABS, again, I don't see any reason why you would turn this off other than for the fun factor, I guess. I keep that on 100%. And the rest of this doesn't apply to what we're doing right now. So that's where I'm at with the controls and whatnot. So the first thing I like to do, and the first thing I recommend people do, is come down here to Ollie Speedway. Why Ollie Speedway? Well, it's close to the starting house, for one thing. For another, it's a very short track, and it is easy. It's easy to memorize, it's easy to figure out, it's easy to get your lines set up. Almost all cars are going to take very similar lines on this track. And that's important when you're tuning, keeping things consistent. If you're driving a really complicated route or something and you're trying to tune a car, it's a lot harder to tune because you don't know if it's a skill issue or if, you know, the track is just biting you or what. So I like to practice here. It's convenient. There's a gas pump and an EV charger. There's a tuning shop. And like I said, it's close to the starter home. So the first thing I recommend anybody do, especially if you're new to the game, is pop down here to Ollie, grab any old car you want, and start just cutting some laps and get used to the flow of the track. And eventually you should get to the point where you can just jump into any vehicle in the game, take it down here to Ollie, and just start doing laps comfortably without a whole lot of time. Because that's going to save you a lot of time in the grand scheme of things. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just doing laps. I've done a bunch of laps at Ollie before, so I know the track pretty well. I'm not even really worried about my times right now. I'm just kind of like, I'm just trying to observe. And I'm not going for like maximum time attack stuff here either. I'm just kind of driving normally. And what I'm trying to figure out is like, what's good about the way it handles right now? What's not so good? Just trying to get a feel for it, you know? I'm not necessarily trying to find the best line around the track so much as I am just trying to figure out what the truck's doing. And so a lot of you will probably observe that there's a lot of body lean going on right now. That is absolutely true. Now in this game, the body roll doesn't really hurt the handling that much. It can lead to rollovers and stuff, obviously. And also, the more the body roll there is, the more you are unloading the inside tires on a turn, which is going to decrease overall traction, of course. But you don't go crazy with sway bars and stuff just yet. So you can kind of not worry about that too much, especially if you decide to stiffen up the springs. That's also going to help with body roll. So that's not something we should be too concerned about right now. Mostly what you're trying to figure out is, you know, what parts of the track is it good? What parts is it not very good? And, you know, I'm doing pretty good with my lap times here. They're pretty consistent. I've noticed that this part of the track here, it definitely tends to oversteer pretty substantially when you get on the brakes a little bit. And with the low power that this truck has, I don't have to use the brakes that much. So that's also something that is hard to tune if you're not using the brakes very often. But we'll get to that in a minute. But I'm definitely noticing, since I've put the open diff in this thing, it's peeling that inside rear tire on all the turns, which is to be expected. But for the most part, it's handling pretty well. It's pretty comfortable to drive. It's a little bit clumsy. It bottoms out right there in that little dip, so we got to deal with that. It does tend to oversteer pretty dramatically when you get on the brakes and turn at the same time, which is also to be expected. But for the most part, it's doing pretty well. So with this information, I'm going to start making my first adjustments. Now, if you're new, I suggest taking the car as it is onto the track without making any changes first. Just get used to the car, the way it drives, completely stock, and go from there. Once you've gotten a little bit better at it and you know, you're more comfortable with the track and stuff like that, you can start making probably the first adjustment that I would make, and that's with wheels and tires. So in this game, let's go to our parts here, and we'll start with wheels. The wider the tire is modeled in the game, the more traction it will have. For a long time, I was wondering if this is true. I have been able to verify that while I've been doing tunes. The wider the tire is, the more overall traction you're going to have. So there's lots of different wheels and tires to choose from based depending on what kind of vehicle you've got. For all the normal cars, there's pretty much every wheel in the game. What you're really looking for is the widest tire you can get with also the lightest weight. Now there's some exceptions to that. You know, and also if you're looking for a particular aesthetic, then obviously you can take some compromises there. But for the most part, for the money, the Stinger #1 is a good wheel. It's wide, it's fairly lightweight, 15 kilograms. It also doesn't cost that much. So that's a good one to use for almost anything. And then let's see here. We move on down. The Duke wheels are also quite wide, but they are a little bit heavier. Let's see. The Zager wheels, pretty good. They're wide. They're fairly lightweight. They've got that Euro car look, if that's what you're going for. They are kind of expensive. The Enfo GTs, I think, are the lightest and the widest wheels in the game. Don't quote me on that, but I think they are. So if you go to any like online racing events or whatever, a lot of people are going to be using these for all of their vehicles. And that's why. The Fordham wheels are also quite lightweight and also quite wide. And then you can use the Rayton wheels as well. They're not quite as wide as the Enfo GT, I don't think. Or actually, maybe they're pretty darn close. They look pretty close, actually. So yeah, those are also an option. You want to stay away from wheels that are heavier, unless you're doing some off-road racing or you're doing front-wheel drive stuff. And I'll get to that in a minute. So for the purposes of this truck, I think I'm just going to go ahead with the old Stinger #1s. They fit the look. They're wide enough. They should be fine. I also have 5 of them in stock already. So let's go ahead and pop those babies on there. Now, is there any reason to use a more narrow wheel than these like really wide ones? You know, like the Koma, these only weigh 15 kilograms, but they're very narrow. And there's also some, let's see, was it the Zydro, they're not quite as wide. Let's see, yeah, the Mickey lightweights, they're not quite as wide as well. There is a reason to use those. If you were tuning a car and you're finding out that when it loses traction, it's very sudden and abrupt, then I would suggest going to a more narrow wheel. And the reason why I would suggest that over using like the regular tires instead of the high performance tires is because you would be reducing your overall traction at all times with a tire that wasn't as wide, or with a tire that wasn't as high performance. The maximum grip of that tire is going to be less than the high performance tires in all situations. If you're using the high performance tires, then you're going to have maximum grip, or especially for acceleration and stuff like that, at all times. But narrowing that contact patch a little bit might be just what it needs to keep it from abruptly losing traction. If that makes any sense. So I would try that, because I've seen people like use like drift tires on the front instead of like the high performance ones or whatever. Don't do that. I suggest narrowing that wheel first and seeing if that gives you the results that you want. But that goes on to tires. There's no reason to use anything other than the performance low profile tire unless you're doing drifting or unless you're doing off-road. Straight up. So we're going to pop 4 of those babies on there too. So as I've said before, if you've been doing this for a while, then usually the first thing I'll do is I'll just bring a car down here and put whatever wheels I want and the high performance tires on it right away and start doing laps instead of doing laps with the stock tires. Just saves a little bit of time, really. But this is drastically changing how the truck is handling. Look at that. It's like wanting to flip over now. The change in grip is significant. And see, so that's changing my impression of what needs to happen here. It's starting to oscillate a little bit front to back. You see that? Yeah, the body roll is becoming more of an issue now. But it's, you know, I've got a lot more drive out of the corners. I can go around corners overall at a faster speed. Those are all good things. Because the tires do make a massive difference. I think I could probably even, yeah, I keep it in fourth gear here. Yeah, but see that it's like practically coming off the ground. And that is not what you want. All right, so we're going to bring it back in. And also this is making the issue with the differential more apparent. So let's go in and make a couple more changes and then we'll go back on the track. Now, another thing I suggest, unless you're really in a hurry and you've really done it a bunch of times, only make like 1 or 2 small changes at a time before you go back out. Because if you make a bunch of changes and then the car handles worse or it's a little better but not quite and you're not sure what the difference is, it's going to be hard to keep track of that stuff. So yeah, only make like 1 or 2 small changes at a time. So we got to actually repair the body since we kept dinging it off the pavement. But so we're going to go into the powertrain, limited slip, and we'll go back to the 1.5 way clutch pack limited slip here. And what this means, I don't exactly know what the numbers mean in the game. If that's a torque value or if that's a percentage thing of slip versus non-slip, I don't know. Slip versus locking. But with the 2 numbers here, 50-30, that's either 50% slip forward in like forward traction, 30% slip under coasting. So like when you're letting off the throttle, let's say getting ready to turn or under braking or something like that, it's going to have a 30% slip, limited slip effect, and a 50% limited slip effect under throttle. I think that's what that means. But you know, don't quote me on that. The 2-way clutch pack, I think, means that it's locked up. Like it can't be 100% because that'd be the same as a locked differential, and these do not behave the same way. So I don't know exactly what that is, what the difference is there. But this one I think is just under acceleration, not under coasting. So that's the difference there. My suggestion is to start with the 1.5 way. That works pretty well for almost everything. It's also like probably the easiest to get used to when you're doing your tuning. So let's take another rip out there with this. And like I said, this door arm automatically comes with that differential. So I put the open one in there just to give you guys an understanding of what it's like when you have an open diff. But you'll see that the inside rear tire is not a constant fire like it was before. And it's definitely putting the power down better. And so I imagine that our body roll issues are going to be even more of a concern now. Yep, see? Caused it to break traction there. And so I'm also, I want to point out that when you're doing this, I suggest using the stock engine without any upgrades to power to tune the vehicle for handling. Don't worry about doing the engine swaps and stuff yet. Having that much extra power is also going to make the vehicle more difficult to drive just normally. So it's going to be a lot harder to understand where changes need to happen for the setup, if that makes any sense. And sometimes even if you have a vehicle that has a lot of horsepower from the factory, or, you know, as stock, the way it comes stock, I'll even put a smaller engine in it just to help me, you know, get the tune down better. So keep that in mind. Don't just throw the biggest engine you got in there right away, because that's going to just make it more difficult in the long run. So now that we've got tires on it, we've got wheels, we've got a differential, I think it's probably time to start actually doing some work for the handling. So what I would probably do next is try to address both the kind of wallowiness of the vehicle and the body roll. So the first thing I would probably want to do is go to suspension, and we will bump up the springs and the dampers a little bit. Now, in my experience, pretty much every car in this game is under dampened. Okay. Sorry, I had to take a drink there. And I think that, like, you know, the cars that aren't sports cars are even under dampened even more to make them feel like floppy and soft, like a, you know, like a regular normal car would feel like. One of the ways that I help, that helps me kind of tune the springs and dampers in the game is to come in here to the ride height. And I haven't made any ride height changes yet. Go down to the -10, which is the lowest setting you can get, and then bump it up to the +1. And observe what the truck does when you do that. So sometimes I also will just like go from 1 to 10 and watch it when you drop it down too. But you see that front end just like boing, yoing, yoing, yoing. Like it oscillates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, kind of 5.5, 6 times even. That's crazy. So that tells me that the dampening is way off, and the springs probably need a little bit of adjustment too. The rear isn't too bad. So let's throw some 150% dampers in the front. And so now if we go back to the ride height thing and we go down to -10 and then up to there. So that was about 4.5 or 5 times. So that still doesn't seem like quite enough to me. And what I'm really looking for, it's kind of hard to explain. I guess I'll tell you when I get there. So let's go do this again. Okay, that's a little bit better. So let's go ahead and put some stiffer springs in the front too. Let's start with just 150s. And we'll go back to the ride height and do this again. So the more spring you put into it, the more damper you're going to need. So I'm going to have to increase that now. Because look at it, just like it's just bouncing away there. So we'll go back to the dampers. Let's go up to 300s. And we'll go back to the ride height. And boing. Okay, so that's looking better. Like 3.5, maybe 4 bounces before it settles out. It still might seem a little bit too soft. But let's go with that for now. So I'm not going to change anything else. Okay, that was just front springs, front dampers. Ride height is still stock. So let's go cut a couple more laps here and see what we get this time. And then again, it's just going back and making observations. Like every time you make a change, don't expect it to like be the change that fixes everything. Okay, look at that. It is way more planted already. Now there's still a little bit of body roll. It still wants to kind of kick the back end around when you go under brakes. But that is a substantial difference. And also with having those extra springs in the front, that's helping weight transfer to the back under acceleration. So I've got it. Oh, I can almost keep it flat all the way around that turn that time, which I could not do before. So that was a 45.9. That's faster than any lap I've done so far, and that was just the first lap. So it still bottoms out there a little bit, and it looks like that's kind of happening in the back of the truck. So we'll come around here. So yeah, it's even a little bit, it's easier to control during a slide too, because it's not just abruptly gaining and losing traction with those really soft dampers that it had before. Look at that, a 43.6. So that was almost what, 4 seconds faster than our initial laps. So guys, that's a huge difference. And all I did was change the front end. I didn't even do any of the back stuff yet. I didn't do any sway bars. That's pretty massive, actually. So let's keep going here. The rear did seem like it was a little bit soft. So if we go in here to ride height, and we do this again, like you can even do it like to the extreme. Like go to -10 and then hit like +9. Boing. It gives you a more exaggerated effect, but usually I just toggle between these two and just kind of see how it behaves. So the rear actually seems pretty stiff already, and it's probably because they intended you to use this truck as a to do deliveries and stuff, so it probably has fairly high springs in the back already. So let's go ahead and add 150 dampers in the rear. And then I think we might need to bump up the fronts just a little bit more. So we're going to go to 400s there. And it might need more springs in the front too, but we'll get to that. Yeah, there we go. That's looking pretty nice. That's looking pretty nice. All right, so let's go back out, do it again. Whoops. Okay. We'll do a couple more laps. Now, normally I would be probably, I would probably be doing more laps than this between changes. Oh yeah, see that it almost rolled on me there. It's still got quite a bit of body roll. And the rear still kind of, it's still a little bit tail happy. It's not that bad actually. It's not too bad. There we go. Let's get a little bit swazy there, and you see it kind of flopping back and forth. So that's where the roll bars are going to come into play here. Now the thing about this game is that it, you know, the driving experience is pretty good, right? But it's not perfect. And there's definitely some things that it gets wrong. So, you know, having it like the problem that I had at the beginning when I was tuning stuff in this game was trying to keep things realistic. Don't worry about that. Like, just tune stuff so that it feels right. If you try to do it so that it's realistic, it doesn't always make sense. Okay, yeah, this is feeling pretty good. Yeah, we definitely need to take care of that body roll now. So if the changes that you made for the springs did not correct the body roll, then it's time to start looking at sway bars. That was a 43.69. It's a smoking lap. So this, we'll make a hot rod out of this thing yet. All right, so let's get it in here. Yep, more body damage. We'll deal with that. Okay, so the suspension, anti-roll bars. So I always recommend to put more front bar in it than rear most of the time. But I suggest starting with 120. Thankfully, there's not a whole lot of options. So we'll put the 120 in there. I don't think the rear is going to need it, but we'll see. Now, just because it tends to be tail happy doesn't mean that a rear bar won't help it. That will probably make it a little bit more tail happy, but it could also help with the body roll enough that that it helps balance it a little bit better. So you're just going to have to experiment with it. Okay, this is feeling pretty good. So another thing that the dampers do is help with weight transfer front to rear. So that's, you know, braking, accelerating, stuff like that. So if you feel like you're having issues in those transition zones between braking and accelerating, then I suggest taking another look at your dampers. And we're still bottoming out there, so we gotta fix that issue, because that will be a problem. That's a pretty small dip compared to what you might run into on a user-created event route. So we want to deal with that too. You don't want it scraping off the ground all the time. All right, that was a little bit too aggressive there. Sideways is usually not faster, just saying. So that didn't really make the front end any like tighter, you know? It was a 45, yeah, so that wasn't a great time. So I think I'm actually going to put a little bit more roll bar in the front. Because like I said, that didn't make it tighter. That just kind of it honestly wasn't that noticeable. So go back into here, go back into front sway bar, and we'll pop a 150 in there instead. Wait, is that what was already in it? No, that was 150. I had a 120 before. All right, and we're gonna go out again, rinse and repeat. Another thing that's good to look at while you're doing this too is the radiator temperature. If you're going to be doing a race where you're at maximum RPM a lot, then it's probably a good idea to upgrade the radiator. I feel like the cars overheat way more than they should in this game. So that's something you pretty much have to do if you're going to race anything. Okay, this actually helped the handling a lot. It's a lot more neutral. This is feeling pretty good. All right, like I said, I would normally do more laps, but I'm just going to do like one at a time here. All right, so now that you've got the springs and the dampers and the sway bars kind of mostly sorted, the next thing you should probably try to work on is the wheel spacers. So pretty much every car needs spacers in this game because the wheels are tucked in pretty far. And this is going to change how it handles substantially. So that's in suspension and wheel spacers. Now, if you're going for a realistic, then I like to make them, you know, realistic looking. So pretty flush with the fender. And I'd say that the front might be a little bit too far, but just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and pop those in there. So let's go out and see what it's like now. And you'll probably notice that after you space it out a little bit, it's going to be... There's probably going to be less body roll, and it will probably corner slightly faster. So that's why I wasn't too worried about the body roll that I was seeing at the beginning. Because once you start to get your tune like hashed out, it kind of tends to go away on its own a little bit. Yeah, see, that actually the front end even lost a little bit of traction there that time. Which isn't a bad thing. I kind of prefer to have a car a little bit more understeery than oversteery anyway. Especially rear-wheel drives, because it's always easy to just initiate oversteer. Yeah, that feels really nice. All right. All right, so now what do we do? I noticed that it was still having that issue of bottoming out. And the ride height, I feel like, is actually pretty good. Unless you're going for... unless you're going for a certain type of look, the ride height doesn't make as much of a difference in the game as you think that it would. Like, you could slam this thing all the way down. Here, we have these. Let's go ahead and install them. I'll show you guys. So now we're running real low. And I imagine the only thing this is going to do is make it bottom out more. It might even do it on regular turns and stuff. We'll see here. Yep, scrape. And it's not handling any better either. So my motto is run as much ground clearance as you need to fit the track. So if you have a track that goes through the city and you want to, like, hop some curbs to kind of gain as much advantage as you can over in some of those sharp turns, then go ahead and raise it up some. If there's an off-road section, then by all means you're going to have to raise it. Yeah, see, we're scraping. You don't want that, because the body damage will absolutely kill your top speed in this game. It makes a huge difference. That's another point of contention I have with this game. But you don't want that if you're trying to race. So I think with the stock ride height, and it was still bottoming out, I think what I need to do is probably bump the rear springs up a little bit more. Because I would much rather, instead of raising it up even higher, I think it would make more sense to try and defeat that with spring rate. And maybe even more damper, I'm not sure. We'll try it. Alright, so ride height. Get those crazy ones out of there. Okay, so let's go spring. And we'll do 120s in the rear, I guess. And let's see, we've already got 150 dampers in the rear. So let's do our check here. Yeah, I feel like it might even need more in the front, which is crazy. Let's go ahead and do 300 in the front. That's kind of extreme. Normally, I'd just do it one step at a time, but I'm trying to save time on the video here. Yeah, ride height. So we'll go back down here. Let's see, now it's starting to wobble again. Boing, boing, boing. That's not what you want. So we're going to get 500s. Now, do you see what I said about the vehicles being underdampened in this game? I still feel like that's not enough. So maybe we'll bump the springs down one tick. All right, let's try that, and I'll see if it'll still bottom out. Hopefully, I didn't throw the balance of the truck completely off. Looks like it still might want to do it. But so far, everything is feeling pretty good. The body roll seems to be a little bit better in control now. So I don't think that's something we have to worry about anymore. You know, so just slamming the car all the way to the ground and stiffening everything up as high as it'll go is usually not a good recipe in this game. It's usually not a bad thing to keep it. Yeah, see, it didn't bottom out that time. So I'm going to call that good for now. It's usually good to keep a little bit of ride height, and it's good to keep things not as stiff as they'll go. Mainly because I don't think the dampers are stiff enough to match with spring rates much over 300. Which kind of sucks, but yeah, that's the way the game is, so that's what we got to work with here. All right, so let's bring her back in. And one thing we definitely need to do is repair the body damage again and put in the bigger radiator. All right, there we go. So now we're going to talk about transmission ratios and power adders and stuff. So for this little track, I think it's the gear ratios that we have right now are pretty good. And I don't know what transmission we're even running. 4-speed sports. Okay, yeah, that's fine. I wish that the game had more transmission options. It doesn't have enough. And none of them are very good choices. I feel like the 4-speed muscle transmission is better than the sports one. Because there's less of a gap between second and third gear. But the 5-speed sports seems to be the best overall. The 6-speed I only really use if I'm using a really high horsepower car that's going to go really fast, but I also need gears for slower speeds. Otherwise, it's not really worth the weight penalty. So the 5-speed sports or the 4-speed muscle are the two transmissions I use the most in all the regular cars. So this one has this one's got a 1-to-1 fourth gear. So the 5-speed sports is basically the same, only it has like an extra overdrive gear. So we're going to go ahead and throw that in it since we have one. And I shouldn't have to mess with the final drive at all. If you want to check your final drive, you know, it's going to depend on your track and where you're racing, but here at Ollie Speedway, there's this convenient, very long highway section here, so you can test your top speed there and see if that's going to work for you. Another reason why it's nice to do this stuff at Ollie Speedway. But let's go ahead and put some more engine in this thing too. Now, what I will say about putting stronger engines in this in these vehicles is that the engines weigh a lot. So and so this has only got the 140 horsepower V8, and it was doing pretty good, I'd say. But so look at the weights though. That one weighs 200 kilograms. This one only weighs 220, and it's, you know, 40 more horsepower. It's kind of like a no-brainer, really. But when you start getting up to like the 320 horsepower one, that's 280 kilograms. So that's, you know, 60 more than this one, 80 more than that one. The weight makes a huge difference. So like, just look at the front of the truck when I put the V12 in there, which weighs 320 kilograms versus this one. Like, you can see the front end of it dropping down. If you put a bigger engine in your vehicle, it is going to affect the handling. The difference between the 140 V8 and the 181 that I just put in there is probably small enough that it isn't going to matter too much. But what you can do is go back into suspension after you've put your bigger engine in there, go back to the ride height thing, and just do a test. And if the front end starts bouncing around all over the place, then you should probably put stiffer springs in there to compensate for the bigger engine. And that's going to make it handle different. That's all there is to it. So, you know, you can get into the turbos and stuff like that too, but you know, I just wanted to keep this, you know, shorter. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this intake in there. I'm not going to mess with the turbo right now, but what I want to do now is just see, you know, with all of these changes, like what kind of a lap we can do. So what was our fastest? Like a 43 something? All right, let's see if I can cut something a little bit quicker than that. And give myself a couple of laps to kind of work up to it here. So I didn't talk about brakes. I would suggest using the upgraded brake pads for everything. There's really no point not to. I didn't put it on this just because, you know, for the sake of testing, it's not going to make that much difference. But let's see if we can get our approach into the into the lap here, a good one. Yeah, that extra power is definitely noticeable. Oh, I did not do that right. My bad. Skill issue. Might have to take 2 laps here. All right, we'll just drift it around a little bit here. Now again, this is not a race car. So, you know, the smaller lightweight cars are going to respond better to tuning on the track, obviously. All right, here we go. Let's get a good run here. That was a 43, almost 43 flat. And I cooked it a little bit too much going into that. Ah, damn it. All right, well. Yeah, I got some drift experience. Yeah, that wasn't ideal. But again, this is a heavy vehicle. Let's see if we can get a 42. I'll do one more lap. Sorry, guys, but, you know, I get into like this hot lapping mindset sometimes, and it's hard to get me out of it. All right, let's get a run at this turn. Yeah, that was a little bit better. All right, that was nice and tidy right there. All right. Get on the brakes, pull it around, give it the beans. All right, keep the throttle on and lift it a little, back on it. Let her slide a little. And boom, 43.82. Oh man, it was just a little bit under. All right, well, whatever. All right, so final thoughts for this. So when you tune on the track, it's obviously going to be different than if you tune for whatever event you're going to do. So one of the things that I like to do is once I'm comfortable with the tune that I have, I just like to drive back to Gangjung here on this road, because you've got twists, you've got turns, you've got elevation changes, you've got road, you've got, you know, some S turns here that go down a hill. There's a lot between here and there, and it's a pretty short distance. And if you wanted to test off-road, you could even use this dirt road here real quick and loop it around. So this is good kind of like test strip from there to there. And then you can go to the tuning shop that's right over here and make changes when they're still fresh in your head. So let's just take a rip back to Gangjung and see what we got here. After we get fuel, of course. And then we can just kind of see, you know, where we're at. Because a lot of times you'll find like you'll tune it on the track and everything is great, and then you'll practice for your event or whatever you're doing, and you'll realize that the tune absolutely sucks. And all you can do is, you know, just go back and make changes until it works out for you. But we're just going to take a rip back to the house. So I'll try to do that without crashing. But basically, just to kind of summarize what you would do if the tune on the road was actually not as good. If the bumps and potholes are throwing you off, then bump up the dampers a little bit more. That will prevent the vehicle from bouncing around so much. And usually, like, if you have any kind of trouble during elevation changes, like dips or anything like that, where it just suddenly loses control, try just bumping the dampers up a little bit, and that will usually help. That wasn't the tidiest of turns right there, but it'll work. You know, and if you have some sections where it gets really, like, especially if it's like on a slight downhill and you need to like slow down to make a sharp turn, you might find that that it'll start understeering like substantially. Sometimes you can actually tune that out with the rear differential. I see that we're bottoming out here, which made me go out of control. So that would tell me that I should probably increase the ride height or the spring rate a little bit more. So there's a lot of things you can do when you think that you have a good tune, and then you realize, oh, it's maybe not so good because you're having a hard time handling the bumps and the dips and stuff. So basically all I got to say is just keep trying, you know, just keep testing. Try to figure stuff out. Like I said, don't worry about the tune being super realistic or not, because it doesn't really apply in this game. And, you know, since we've got the front springs so high, we could actually probably lift the rear of this a little bit. And that would probably help with the bottoming out a little. So if we go in here to ride height, and maybe we'll just do +2. Have 4 of those already. We'll put those in the rear. There we go. So there, that might actually help it, help with the bottoming out. So you just got to keep trying stuff. So that's, I think, about all that I'm going to talk about today. If you guys want me to tune the front wheel drive car, I was going to do that in this episode, but I didn't realize I was going to go as long as I did. So if you want me to tune the front wheel drive car, the little Mickey, I'll do that too. Oops, still bottomed out. Look at that. Still got some work to do. Yeah, I will absolutely do that if you guys want me to. I know the Motortown content doesn't always do great on my channel, but you know, I've been having some success with the Friday night races with Mr. Bug and the guys. So, and they've seemed to be, you know, liking my tunes and stuff. So I just kind of wanted to throw a video out there about, you know, how I normally tune a vehicle in this game, and maybe it'll help you guys out too. So anyways, yeah, if you wanted me to do the front wheel drive car, let me know. If you want me to do an off-road tune, which I don't think I'm as good at doing that, but I can definitely give it a shot, let me know and I'll try that as well. But yeah, that's about it. So thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I enjoyed sharing my knowledge with you guys. Yeah, it's certainly not a definitive I know everything and you guys don't know anything guide, because I don't know everything. I just am telling you what works for me. Yeah, hopefully you guys get something out of it. So, you know, let me know in the comments if you've got your own tips and pointers to share. Please do. Because like I said, I don't know everything. And yeah, I will see you guys on the next one. What? Take care, everybody.